Alright guys, welcome back to Underground Science, and in this video we'll be going over the extrinsic pathway of blood coagulation or the coagulation cascade. Alright, so make sure to go and check out my intrinsic pathway where we left off right here. Alright, so we left off on the fact that factor 8 and 9 as a complex, right, activated the crap out of factor 10, right, so it turned into the inactive form to the active form. And what we also said was that we had the help of calcium and platelet factor 3 here. All right, so platelet factor 3. All right, that also helped in the activation of factor 10. All right, so we said that now let's discuss the extrinsic pathway because there's an extrinsic pathway that happens much quicker than the intrinsic pathway, and that actually also helps activate factor 10. All right, so let's go and look at what the extrinsic pathway is. So remember we took an example again where we have a blood vessel here, right? And so let's go and draw our endothelial cells lining the blood vessel. Okay, so let's go and draw these out real quick. Right, not the best drawing at all. So let's go and put our nuclei in here. And so what will happen during an injury, right, is that we're going to injure our endothelial lining. So remember again, we have a basement membrane that's part of our tunica intima layer of our blood vessels. And so if we injure a blood vessel lining part, right, a specific part, right, so let's go and indicate an injury right here. Oh crap, right? So the blood vessels are, red blood cells are flowing, right, along with the other formed elements and plasma. We don't want blood to start leaking out into the interstitial space. So we're going to do what our body amazingly does, right, is that it's immediately, the endothelial cells, the injured endothelial cells release a protein, right, that's actually bound to the collagen that will attract platelets, all right? So the endothelial cells release proteins that are actually bound to the collagen, and that's why the platelets will be attracted to the collagen. Because if they see the collagen, that means this blood vessel lining is cut, it's exposed. All right, so the platelets, right, the fragments of the megakaryocyte in our bone marrow, just cytoplasmic fragments, will then start coming and start aggregating over here, forming a platelet plug. We said this in the intrinsic pathway video also. And as the platelets come, they'll attract even more platelets because the platelets that first arrive start releasing chemicals to attract more platelets. All right. And so this whole platelet plug formation, we said, along with this, we said that the platelets had negative charges on their surface of their membrane. These negative charges, we said, started the intrinsic pathway, right? The activation of factor 12, which we don't have here. Let me go and write that down. So then factor 12 becomes active because of the platelets, the platelet plug, the injury, and the negative charges. All right, so factor 12. We're going to write factor 12. And then we said we discussed intrinsic pathway, and now let's go and see what the extrinsic pathway is. So the extrinsic pathway, the injured endothelial cells release a specific tissue factor, all right, also called thromboplastin, or also called, all right, tissue factor 3. All right, so tissue factor, and it's in specific, it's factor 3. All right, and let's go and write another name for it that we sometimes see is going to be thromboplastin. All right, so thromboplastin. All right, sweet. Now tissue factor 3, guys, will then go ahead and find the inactive form of factor 7 inside the blood. All right, so tissue factor 3 will then try to go look for where is the inactive form of factor 7. And factor 7 is going to be waiting for factor 3, or thromboplastin. So the inactive form of factor 7 is going to be waiting desperately for a thromboplastin. And once our tissue factor 3, or thromboplastin, sees the inactive form of factor 7, it's going to activate, it's going to bind to factor 7 and activate factor 7, right? So it's going to turn it into its active form. All right, so let's go and write that down. And now factor 7 will then go ahead and it's going to go ahead here, find the inactive, it's going to actually help in this process also to activate factor 10. All right, And we should one other thing we should know is that when we activate factor 10, factor 5, right, that's floating in the vicinity, factor 5 also binds with factor 10 and forms a complex, all right? In particular, it's called a prothrombinase complex, all right? So together, factor 10 and 5 as a complex is going to be called prothrombinase. And we'll see why it's called prothrombinase in a second, all right? So prothrombinase, it's called prothrombinase, right? A indicates it's an enzyme complex. And notice the prothrombin word here. So it's an enzyme that's going to catalyze the reaction of prothrombin to thrombin. We'll see that in the common pathway or the converging pathway in the next video. Prothrombin is factor 2, the inactive form of factor 2 that is. And prothrombinase is going to catalyze the inactive form of factor 2 to the active form of factor 2. All right, so that's why it's called prothrombinase, and we'll see that in the common pathway video, or also called the converging or final pathway. All right, so that's the extrinsic pathway. That's pretty short. It's just remember factor 3, right? Tissue factor 3 or thromboplastin activates factor 7 activates the inactive form of factor 7 to the active form of factor 7. Then factor 7 goes here, helps stimulate the activation of factor 10. Once factor 10 is active, factor 5 also binds to factor 10 to form a complex as known as prothrombinase, and we'll see what happens next in the final pathway, or also called the common pathway or converging pathway, in the next video. All right, guys, so that's it for this video. I hope to see you guys in my next video and also my future videos. We'll talk about more cool topics about chem, biochem, physics, and bio. See you guys later. Don't forget to hit that notification bell, like and subscribe, and stay safe.